Hello everyone, my name is Yenna. You either clicked on this video because A, you're looking for book recommendations, B, you're wondering, what am I missing out in my life? Or C, you're just my friend and you love me. So I was a little intimidated to make this list because I'm new to the YouTube book talk world, and I wanted to create a list that was very accessible and pleasing to the majority of people. But then I realized, that's nearly impossible because we've all experienced different things in our lives, and each book is gonna resonate with some people and it might not resonate the same way to other people. So just keep that in mind, that just because I really like this book doesn't mean that you'll like it, but hopefully you'll like these books because they really taught me a lot in my 20s. So I'm starting off this video with one of the books that completely changed the way I view relationships. I read this book when I was in high school and it really taught me a lot, even though I was only like 16 years old, and I've taken those lessons with me in my 20s, and I think I'll use these lessons for like the rest of my life. So that book is called The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. So this book was written in 1992, so just keep that in mind. But it basically outlines the 5 love languages, which are physical touch, words of affirmation, gifts, acts of service, and quality time. And so each person has a love language. You might have more than one, but basically this is the way you feel the most loved, or the way that you feel you give out love. So for example, you might feel a lot of love when someone hugs you, which is like physical touch, but some people hate physical touch and they don't feel any type of love. And you might feel really loved when someone gives you a gift, but some people hate gifts. So it's really important to know what your love language is so that you can be a better partner and friend or daughter or sister, so that you guys can kind of communicate what your love language is and have a better relationship by knowing each other's love language. So my top love languages are definitely quality time and words of affirmation. So I love it when people hang out with me or they give me words of affirmation. It's really interesting to know this about yourself, because what if I feel the most loved by words of affirmation and my friend or my boyfriend never give me words of affirmation, but they give me a lot of gifts? I'm not gonna feel that loved, right? Because we have different love languages. I think it's okay for you to have a different love language than your friend or your boyfriend or your girlfriend or whoever. It's more important to know what your love languages are, so you can recognize that you guys do love each other, you just communicate it very differently. And then once you know, you can kind of have a middle ground and just understand each other a little bit more. I highly recommend this book, but if you don't feel like reading it, I definitely recommend that you take the online quiz. It's free to use and takes like 2 seconds. Okay, the next book is called The Defining Decade by Meg Jay. So Dr. J is a psychologist who writes about how to make the most of your 20s and why this decade matters more than we think it does. She uses scientific research and her conversations with her real-life clients on topics like relationships, should you move in with your partner before marriage, careers, why you should be career driven and not underwork yourself, when should I get pregnant, social network and your identity. Things that we're definitely wondering in our 20s, but people just tell us, you'll figure it out in your 30s, which is like okay advice. Like sometimes you need to hear like, don't worry about it. But I think this book is very constructive and compassionate. I highly recommend this book, especially if you're in your 20s, because I think that when we're in our 20s, we've been told it's okay, just live a young, wild, and free life. You'll figure it out in your 30s. But Dr. J teaches us that actually in your 30s, people really regret a lot of things that they did in their 20s, and they feel a lot of loneliness and emptiness and confusion because of the choices that they made in their 20s. So if you kind of recognize that this decade matters a lot, you might be able to create better choices to set yourself up for a wiser and more successful future in your 30s. Honestly, I was really nervous to read this book because I didn't want someone telling me that I was doing something wrong. I didn't want to hear, oh, you have to be more proactive, or you have to have done this and you're really behind. That's what I was expecting this book to be about. But it didn't really make me feel behind. It made me feel encouraged to get a head start. Okay, the next book is called Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. And this book explains why habits exist and how we can change our habits. This is such a cool book because it talks about different subjects. We learn from neuroscientists, we learn from CEOs, we learn from Olympic athletes, and we just learn how these big companies or these successful people implement keystone habits and how we can learn from their successes and their failures. And I'm sure for you, you've wondered, how can I implement this good habit? How can I lose weight? How can I start waking up early? And I think the key to understanding how to be successful is to understand how habits work. And this book just teaches you that habits aren't destiny, it wasn't written in the stars. You can always break bad habits and you can always form good habits once you know the psychology behind it. Again, I thought this book was so cool. I learned a lot about business and psychology, and I majored in advertising, so I found this book really fascinating on the psychology behind some companies. So I feel like you can really improve yourself or improve your business by reading this book and learning how habits work so they can help you succeed in the future. Okay, this next book has some profanity, so excuse my language, but this book is called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck by Mark Manson. And this is not your typical self-help book, as you can probably tell by the title. So Mark Manson wrote this book after seeing this mindless positivity culture in self-help books. So he decided to write his own self-help book, and he is a little bit more realistic and honest in his writing. Manson uses many of his own personal experiences to illustrate how life struggles often give it more meaning, which he argues is a better approach than constantly trying to be happy. I learned so much from this book. Some key takeaways I learned from this book is that action can lead to motivation. So I think a lot of the times we think that we need motivation to do things like, oh, I really want to lose weight and go to the gym. I don't have the motivation to do it. Well, sometimes you just need to do it, and then you'll get the motivation. Another key takeaway I learned from this book is that it's a good thing that you're not certain. Like, everyone is kind of wrong, We can form whatever opinion we have right now, but 10 years from now, your mind might change. I know my opinions have definitely changed within the past 10 years, and it's actually a good thing. It means we're evolving, we're learning, we're growing. We should actually recognize this a little bit more, is that we're all kind of wrong. Another key takeaway is that if you want to be happy, you have to be willing to suffer for something. So what are you willing to suffer for? What values are you prioritizing? And instead of worrying about things that are out of my control, things that I don't value, I can start prioritizing what I do value and find more happiness by prioritizing what actually matters. Okay, and this last key takeaway, I think my generation especially should think about this more, is that we're always looking for the next best thing. That's why we love using dating apps, because you have so many options and you're just wondering, okay, like, this guy's cute, but like, is there a cuter guy out there? And Mark Manson writes about how it's actually more freeing to be committed to something. It doesn't have to be just about relationships, but it's something to think about because we have so many options in terms of dating or career or where to live, but sometimes it's just nice to just commit to something and try your best in that one thing that you love. Again, I really love this book. If you're not into self-help books, this is different. Like, it's different, okay? Like, he cusses in his books. Like, what? But if you don't feel like reading it, he actually has a YouTube video summarizing all of the 9 chapters, and it's actually a really good summary. So you can go check out his video if you don't feel like reading it. Or if you need like a refresher on what the book was about. Okay, this next book is called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and is written by Robert Kiyosaki and Sharon Lechter. So in this book, Robert writes about his 2 dads. One is his rich dad, which is actually his best friend's dad, and one is his poor dad, which is his real biological dad. His rich dad is this savvy investor, entrepreneur, and he teaches him about business and assets. And his poor dad is a very hard worker, but he never achieved financial freedom. So Robert is here looking at the lessons he learned from his rich dad and the lessons he learned from his poor dad. And he writes about how his rich dad got rich because he did these things, and his poor dad stayed poor because he did these things. And the lessons that his real dad taught him is probably the traditional advice that we've all been told, which is just to save money, don't take any risks, work really hard, work long hours, and if you have any money left over, then you can save money, but you just have to pay off your bills, that sort of thing. But he learns from his rich dad on how the rich actually get rich, and that's through assets. And you can build your wealth through real estate, building businesses, investing in stocks and bonds, and just increasing your financial IQ. If you're already into the finance world, this book is not going to be very groundbreaking for you, but if you're not, you need to pick up this book. I think this is a really good starter book to have to learn about how to make money work for you. And it's crazy how this book was written 24 years ago, but I think like pretty much all of the elements in this book are still true to this day. I'm still learning about finances. I learned a lot from YouTube, but this book is just a really great intro on how to make money for you, how the rich get rich, poor stay poor. So just check it out. Okay, if you made it this far, you might be like, Yenna, where is the fiction? Like, I hate nonfiction. All right, I got you. Here is one fiction book that I think everyone should read. Maybe. That's subjective, but this book is called The 5 People You Meet in Heaven by Mitch Albom. So this book follows this man named Eddie who works at an amusement park, and he dies at the amusement park in a freakish accident. And when he wakes up in heaven, he encounters this journey where he meets 5 people who were intertwined in his life somehow, who had some significant impact on him. I really like this book because it had so many good quotes in it. So I always read reviews before I read a book, and some people were saying this book was really cheesy and religious, but I disagree. Okay, so spoiler alert, I'm going to talk about the ending of this book. I think a lot of us feel like we need to accomplish something in our lives. We don't want to get to the end of our lives and regret that we didn't do anything, we didn't make our lives meaningful, we didn't achieve anything. And Eddie hated that he worked at the amusement park. He really resented his father because he felt like he was tied down to this job because of his father, and he felt like he didn't achieve anything in his life. And he was just sad that he was just like a maintenance guy at an amusement park. But at the end, he meets this girl who, again, spoiler, who tells him that, yeah, he was a maintenance guy, but he kept kids safe, and that's such a beautiful thing. Like without Eddie, all these kids wouldn't be safe at the amusement park. And there's such a pressure to have a coveted job like being a doctor or a lawyer. I think one of the biggest questions that people have at my age is, what do I want to do with my life? Meaning, what kind of job do I want to have? And we feel like if we don't have these coveted jobs, something that like fires us up, we feel like we haven't succeeded in life. But to find joy in the mundane parts of our lives, maybe even a job that you're not fired up about, to find joy in that, to find something beautiful out of it, I think is such a empowering thing. Like for Eddie, he was a maintenance guy in a amusement park, and for him, he didn't like that he was doing that, but at the end of his life, he learned that, oh, actually, this little girl told me that I kept kids safe, and maybe that was like the purpose for my life, and that's awesome. Maybe you're like a hairstylist and that's not what you want to do with your life, but as of right now, you're making people feel beautiful, and that's awesome. And maybe you're an Uber driver, and maybe you didn't really want to do that, but if you think about it, you're bringing people to a date or to a job interview, something that would really help them get to where they need to be, and you're helping them on their journey. This was one of my first fiction books that I've read in a while, and in terms of the writing and the visualizations that I've had, I really liked it. And you can really learn from all the 5 people that he met in heaven. Topics like sacrifice, forgiveness, love. And this book is actually pretty short. I read it in one go, and it's very streamlined. So I recommend that you check this book out, and you might learn a lot from these 5 people that he meets in heaven. So those are the books that really changed my life recently, and that I highly recommend to y'all, especially if you're in your 20s like me. I'm always open to book suggestions, so let me know in the comments what book has resonated with you, what book you really recommend other people read. It could be nonfiction or fiction, whatever floats your boat. If you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm just gonna plug my Instagram and my podcast, so make sure to check it out. What are you still doing in this video? Get to reading. See y'all next time. Bye.